In this video, I'm going to share with you my journey going from a burned out investment banker to a thriving and fulfilled coach. I share tons of strategies and tactics on this channel on how to generate your leads and get your clients and grow a coaching business. But sometimes I fail to share with you my own journey and my own story. So if you're new to my videos, my name is Peter Scott. I am the founder of Fearless Coach Academy, where we have trained thousands of coaches for the last 10 years to launch and scale their coaching business. But how did I start? Well, let me take a moment and just introduce myself. I did not graduate college and decide to build a coaching business. I started my career in finance, in investment banking of all things. So if you've ever seen the movie Wall Street, Boiler Room, Wolf of Wall Street, again, does not paint the industry in a positive way, but that's kind of the work that I did. We did mergers and acquisitions. We would sell companies. I even worked in private equity. But I discovered along my journey that I was not passionate and not fulfilled as a coach. And I don't know if you can relate to that. Maybe you watching this is someone who is already a corporate leader or business leader. You've developed a career. You've been successful. You have the title. You have the respect. You have the income, but you're not fulfilled. And that's how I felt I was. I wasn't a leader yet. I was still early stages of my career, but two pivotal events happened in my life that set me on the course of coaching. The first one was my father passed away. And I was quite young. I was 25 years old. He was only 60 when he passed away. And when we lose a parent or we lose a family member, I'm sure you can relate to this. It really changes your life and it puts life in perspective. And to me, it helped me recognize how fragile life is and how tomorrow isn't guaranteed to me whatsoever. And so it planted the seed that, I was living this career because my family approved of it, but it was miserable to me. So what else could I do? Now at this stage, I didn't know I wanted to become a coach. I just knew I didn't want to do investment banking. The second big event that happened, and I'll never forget this, because there's this one summer when I lived in Chicago and I was working probably 80 to 90 hours a week on average, every single week, all summer. And if you've ever lived in the Midwest or lived in Chicago, you know that like June through September is priceless. It's like the best time of year. Holidays are cool, but it's just like when everyone gets to go out to the lake, we're outside, it's beautiful out, and I was working 90 hours a week. And I don't have a problem working hard, but doing something that that I don't enjoy was rough. And I'll never forget this summer, one of the partners of the firm that I worked at, somebody who I admired and respected, was working the same amount of hours. And for an analyst or an associate like me, that wasn't uncommon. But for a managing director and a partner, they should be with their family. They should be out on the golf course entertaining clients. But this person was literally in his office all the time. And he was in there, as late as I was. And after a few months, and I got, courageous enough and brave enough to ask him, I was like, Glenn, what in the world are you doing? Why are you working so much right now? Because there was no pressing pitch. There was no big meetings that he had. And as we got to know each other and we shared a lot of meals together, he shared with me that he was working so hard because he didn't want to have to go home to his family, because he had neglected them for so many years. And in that moment, it gave me a crystal ball into my future, because he was the man that I aspired to become. He had the big mansion and he had the suits and he had the cars and the watches and all the things that I thought I wanted. And there's nothing wrong with those things if they align with your values, but he pursued them at the cost of his family and the cost of his health. And so between this moment, this aha moment, and my father passing away, I decided that I wasn't going to stick in this career much longer. I didn't know what I wanted to do, right? But I knew that investment banking, I knew that private equity wasn't for me, even if I could make a ton of money. And I was making really good money at that time. And then I started to become a student. I started to read books. I started to listen to podcasts. YouTube wasn't even a thing there, but I started to consume stuff and I got introduced to the whole personal growth, personal development movement. I remember being introduced to Tony Robbins and Landmark and all these different things out there. And some of them you may love, some of them you may hate, but I think a lot of them have positive intentions. And there's this one company called Lifebook. And Lifebook, they ran this 4-day event, this seminar in Chicago where you go through and you clarify your vision for your life and you create a blueprint to achieve it. Really powerful work. And I went through it as a client because I didn't know what I wanted to do. So I signed up. I paid the $3,500 or $4,000 or whatever it was to go through the weekend seminar. And I designed my Lifebook and I said, this is unbelievable. Wow. This is what these people get to do for a living, is like help guide people to live their best life. Now that sounds kind of airy-fairy, but it's the big idea, right? And so I basically was relentless. I said, listen, I don't know if you're hiring right now, but I'm looking to be a coach. I want to help people change their life. And now they didn't really, look at having me be a coach yet. They wanted me to sell their program because they wanted to grow the business, of course. And so that's where I started. I started to sell Lifebook to people. And I got really passionate about it because I believed in the product. I believed in the experience. It transformed my life. And in doing that, I was very blessed to meet the who's who of personal development. Some of the biggest names in the industry were our clients. And so I got to see speakers and authors and coaches and therapists and all these huge people that are transforming humanity in the human potential and human achievement movement. And I got the opportunity to develop sales skills and develop marketing skills and actually coach clients. And I was like, this is awesome. So I did that for 3 years. I literally coached in a company for 3+ years before I launched my coaching business. Now I'm sharing this with you because that was an unfair advantage. I'm going to be very honest about that. For 3 years, I got to study marketing. I got to study influence and persuasion, communication. I got to go to trainings. I got to develop these skills before I even launched my coaching business. Now, do I think you need 3 years of training or 5 years of training to do that? No, but let's be honest. We live in an age today where we lost the art of apprenticeship. This was my apprenticeship. I got paid to develop the skills to build a coaching business and impact people's lives. And at a certain point, I realized I was growing someone else's business, not mine. As much as I love John and Missy and the founders of the company and the team and the culture and everything, it wasn't mine. And so what did I do? Well, I didn't quit and launch my coaching business. I wasn't ready to do that. So I decided to dip my toe in the water. I remember moving out to Arizona to live near my best friend at the time, Sean Stevenson, who has passed away, and his wife, Mindy, who were also two of the best coaches on the planet, and got to spend about 8 months with them. And I remember starting a website. It was a blog actually called Design a Fearless Life. That was the brand before Fearless Coach Academy. And I started a blog. And I started to post on, I think it was Facebook. I don't even know if Instagram was around then. And I didn't know how to coach. I guess I knew how to coach Lifebook's clients, but I didn't know how to go get clients myself, right? Or generate leads myself. I didn't know what my niche was and my message was and my process was and all that. So I just started to create content, communicate a message. And about 6 months after that, I was not getting traction at all. And Lifebook noticed that I was doing this thing on the side. So they're like, hey, Peter, what's going on? Are you helping us? Are you doing your own thing? And so that happened for a while, about 6 to 8 months, until one day I didn't fully commit to growing my coaching business. I was dabbling, and then I got a phone call in an airport. I'll never forget. I was in Chicago, about to board a plane, and I got the phone call from the COO of the company I was working for saying, hey, Peter, I've got some news that's going to be tough to hear. And I was let go of my job. And overnight, I lost my sole source of income. And I remember doing everything in my power not to cry in that moment. It was really tough. My ego was not willing to accept that I got let go and fired from a job, but I did. And I don't blame them. I wasn't focused on helping them. I was trying to do my own thing, but I was just dabbling in it. And that's a lesson for you not to do that. But what it did is it created a moment for me to make a choice. And my choice could have been to play small. My choice absolutely could have been to go back and tap my network in investment banking and private equity and get a job and pay the bills and make a good living and probably be perceived as successful in this life. But I knew if I did that, I would be miserable and I wouldn't be fulfilled and I wouldn't be really impacting people's lives. And so instead, in that moment, I took a huge leap and a risk, and I decided to launch my coaching business. And like I said, at the time, I didn't know who I was serving or what I was offering them. I didn't have many skills at that time. But I said, this is my moment. I was a late 20-something-year-old, early 30-year-old. I didn't have a family dependent on me at the time. And I decided to go all in. And so I said, actually, that same week, I approached a business coach. My first business coach that I ever hired. And I actually invested and hired him. And it was terrifying because this wasn't some cheap $3,000 or $5,000 coach. This was literally a $20,000 investment. And this was back in 2013. $20K then is a lot more than $20K today, right? And so I made the investment. Most of it was my savings. Some of it was money I borrowed from family. Some of it was credit card debt that I took, but I took a leap and I burned the boats. And I look back and I think that was a defining moment because I could have probably dabbled into things and eventually tried to figure out how to build this business and probably done it, but it could have taken me 5 years or 10 years. What that moment did is working with that coach allowed me to collapse time and achieve in 1 year what took most people 5 or 10 years to do. And so I wanted to share this with you because you may be considering starting your own coaching business. And I want you to know that you're never going to feel ready. You're never going to feel courageous enough or brave enough to do this. For me, I was motivated by two ways. I was motivated to have a big impact, but I was also motivated to avoid the pain of the unfulfillment and the lack of passion and purpose in my life. And those two things became a perfect storm, especially with looking at how fragile life was with my father passing away, of like, I'm going to go ahead and just visualize. I'm going to fast forward 10, 20, 30 years from now and say, am I happy? And the answer was clearly no. Recognizing that in investment banking and private equity and corporate, that wasn't my path. And that may not be your path anymore. Maybe you're still young in your career. Maybe you're already in your 50s and 60s. But I just want you to know there's nothing more powerful, more fulfilling, more impactful to do than coaching. And so that was my journey. It wasn't easy, right? I didn't go from 0 to 6 figures overnight. In fact, my first year in my coaching business, I think I only generated 60 grand, $5K a month. But it covered my bills. It allowed me to move out to San Diego and get a really cheap apartment and build my business along the way. And so no matter where you are, if you're being pulled to be a coach, then you've really got to decide, do you have the mindset? Do you have the discipline? Do you have the passion to do this? Because it's not going to be easy, but it's going to be worth it. And as long as you recognize that there may be some fears and there may be some doubts and there may be some insecurities, but that doesn't matter and you're going to move forward and you're not going to quit and you're not going to give up, that's the message that I want you to hear in my story. As always, if you appreciate these videos, I may do more like this. This is very different than my usual videos. Usually it's just me teaching you stuff and giving you tactics and strategies. But if you like it, give me a comment below and subscribe to the channel so you never miss a future video. And if you ever want to learn more about us and Fearless Coach Academy, click the link in the description. Go to fearlesscoachacademy.com. That's our website. You can learn how we help others start and scale their coaching business. My name is Peter Scott, reminding you to be here, act now, and fear less.